Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to destroy people using the Caro-Kann Tartakower variation, which derives from the Caro-Kann classical variation. This is going to be analysis of a game I played against a 1700 club guy just last Thursday. Now, 1700 club equals to about 1900, 1950 chess.com. Usually you'll take the provisional or FIDE rating and add about 200 or 250 to it, and you'll get your approximate online chess.com rating. Now, this game was full of interesting moments, blunders, mistakes, and some educational value, so stay tuned. e4, c6, d4, d5, Caro-Kann, knight c3. Now, if you guys are interested in this whole classical variation, as well as just the Tartakower in general, I have an entire video dedicated to the theory involved in the opening itself. And so if you guys want to see that, I'll link it right above me. Please go check that out. This video will feature some theory, but mostly it's just going to be some ideas and my thought process in this entire game. So I take the pawn, he takes, knight f6, takes, starting Tartakower variation. Here he plays bishop d3, which straight up blunders a pawn. At this point, we spent about 5 total seconds on these moves, and so before I could even realize that he blundered a pawn, I've already made the bishop d6 move, which I'm kind of thankful for because it allowed for a more interesting game, whereas taking this pawn would have just instantly made me up a pawn, and then it would have been just a game of conversion. Knight f3, castles, bishop e3, and rook e8. Rook e8 pinning this bishop to the king. Wanted to see what he does. He plays c3. The whole point of c3 is very, very prominent. You're going to play queen c2 and target this h7 pawn, in which case h5, h4, h3 ideas are very prominent. All of this is mentioned in my video in greater depth. Here I played bishop f4. I figured this was a clever idea to try and win a pawn because this bishop cannot take since the pin, and then I could just win a pawn. I felt like that would be a good strategy. Queen d2. Now, this also prevents the queen c2 idea, so it forces the queen on d2, which I thought was good for me. I play queen e7, adding additional pressure. He decides to castle here, and so I go for my free pawn. Rook e1 makes sense. I take this queen. He takes with the king, which I thought was a little bit odd, but it wasn't any sort of big mistake. He recaptures, and now I have a problem in terms of development. Now, 100% here, the best move for me would have been king f8. Just stop the rook from infiltrating. Just much, much better than anything that I played. Now, what I played was bishop e6. I thought this was a good move because then it would open up the d7 square for my knight. I wouldn't have to reroute it through a6, which looked like a bad square. And then I could just develop my rook normally. Now, what I missed was bishop f5. I cannot take this bishop because it's checkmate. I cannot develop this knight because then I lose all of my advantage in the sense that I no longer have an extra pawn. I did not want this to occur, and so, once again, I blitzed out bishop d7. So I just won one square back. In my mind, this is a good move because it protects from rook e8, and it also means that if this bishop trade was to occur, this rook would now be protected in this whole 8th rank, and so I wouldn't get back rank checkmated. What I did miss, though, was the ability for my opponent to play rook e7, which would just win a piece, basically. Now, here, could have played rook f8, and we've gotten into this situation where it's a rook versus 2 pieces. I have an extra pawn, so technically the material is equal, but this position is most certainly better for white because of the lack of open files. I can really only put this rook on e8. And so let's say king e7, this bishop slides back, rook e8. The rook on e8 isn't very strong. Like, there's really not much it can do. The king on d2 prevents it from going to the second file, and so this rook would be very limited in its mobility, and there's just very little counterplay I can actually generate. Now, thankfully, my opponent spent about 0 seconds thinking on his next move, and he just took this bishop. Like, over 10 moves have been played, and we spent less than 30 seconds altogether, I believe, at this point. Rook e7 now. I play rook d8. I figured this was very good for me because I could play king f8, kick this rook out, and I'd just be in a good position. He plays a4, just a developing move trying to take up space. King f8, king this rook out. Now I noticed that this a4 pawn can become a target, so I play knight to c5. Knight c5 is not a blunder because this knight is not capturable thanks to this pin. All of the advantage I have garnered throughout this game so far has come from the use of utilizing pins. He plays a king move, trying to be able to take my knight. And now I take this pawn. Now you might think I'm up 2 pawns, but realistically that's not the case. We both calculated this idea of rook a1, b5, b6, sorry, b3. I slide my knight to b6, and he takes this a7 pawn. So I'm still up a pawn, but I've simplified a little bit, which I'm really happy about. I played rook a8 in hopes of trading this rook off, and I'll just be significantly better at this point. Now, he understands that since he's down material, he should avoid trade, so he plays rook c7. I give this check, and now the best move for me would have been to just play knight d5, He would have taken this pawn, I would have played knight f5, he would have moved somewhere, and then I could have taken this g2 pawn. This position would have been better for me because I'm still up a pawn. Yes, this pawn mass is scary, but, you know, I would have been able to hold this with ideas like rook e2 check, and then just moving my king, solidifying, and applying pressure on the position. Now, I didn't do this because I figured I could just take the pawn for free. Not for free, but just take the pawn with the rook right away. Somehow, this makes the game equal because after 95, there's king e4. I have to retreat to e7, and he just wins this b5 pawn. The thing is, neither of us spotted this idea because it's a complicated idea with king e4. It seems like a very unnatural move to put your king in the center, just seemingly making it very weaker. So instead of that, after he captured the c6 pawn, I played knight d5 because I realized that I have to move this knight to d5. This would enable the idea of knight f5. I was trying to set up some sort of mating knight in the future. And here, he once again blitzed out a move. Now this move seemingly just blundered a rook. And so by move 28, we spent about 2 minutes in total in a 25-minute tournament. It was just a really bad habit for both of us. We really didn't need to do that. We could have got a more complicated and more sophisticated game in general. But unfortunately, both of us decided that we're going to play as fast as we can. And so he ended up blundering the rook, which I capitalized on. Now, if he didn't do that, what I was expecting was some sort of rook c5 idea. And I could play knight f5, let's say this, and then I could play g5. And I'm just trying to set up this mating attack. I was hoping that, you know, he would play something random and then I could just checkmate him, which I was just a beautiful mating net. But really, this doesn't even work because d5 and then he just escapes. Now, I saw that this move did prevent my attack, but I just figured that I was going to be somehow better because this king would be very locked up. It kind of has very limited mobility. If we notice, like I play a random move, this king has no squares that it can go to. So I thought that I'd be better in this position. Now, technically, white can hold in this position. The engine sees it as equal, even though I'm up a pawn, just because these pawns are way better, and also this pawn is free for the taking in the future. Now, thankfully, neither of this happened because he blundered his rook. So I took the rook, he took the pawn, I played rook f2. The point of this is I want to simplify as much as possible. I really don't want to get into an endgame where his knight gets super active and I somehow mess up and then, you know, I lose a game where I'm up a rook. I really want to avoid that, so I'm just trying to simplify as much as possible. I realize that if he takes this knight and then I take the rook, this promotion is not possible because it's going to be with check, and so I'm going to have just enough time to slide my king over and stop the pawn from promoting. I also figured that if he was to move his knight, I could just slide this knight over to, you know, even a5, and then take this pawn, go over to h3, and try to win this pawn. He took the knight though. I took with check, he slid down. King e7, king c5. So he sacrificed a pawn. There really isn't much he can do though besides that. Let's say he moved this pawn to avoid losing it. I'll just play king d6. Now there's actually nothing he can do. If he goes to b5, I can just play rook c3. And this is just, you know, there's nothing he can do here. So pretty much he was forced to sacrifice his pawn to get some sort of counterplay. I take it, he goes to d5. At this point, he's just hanging on by a thread, hoping I blunder. Unfortunately for him, I still have like 22.5 minutes on my clock. So does he. I just move my rook, slide it down, give this check. Now he's forced to move off of this file. I can blockade this pawn now by playing king d6. He plays king b7. I take the pawn. Then I sacrifice my rook because I realize that I have 4 pawns against 1. This pawn is not going to get pushed, so I can just start pushing this f pawn. And that's exactly what I do. I push the f pawn, and at this point, my opponent resigns. Overall, the biggest mistake from this game by far was me sliding back to bishop d7, and I guess bishop e6 on its own was a bad enough mistake, but bishop d7 just allowed rook e7, in which case I would have been losing. Also, the usage of time was very poor. Both of us have blitzed out this game completely. I mean, as this game ended, over 40 moves we have played, and we spent like 10 minutes in total in a game that could have lasted 50 minutes if we were, you know, careful. At the end of the day, I'm happy with the win. And I hope you guys found this video useful. Hope you guys enjoyed this new format. I really like tournament game analysis because I play tournaments quite often. And analyzing these games is a lot of fun. And I do it anyway. So why not share some of the insights I get from these games with you guys? Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing as it helps my channel out a ton. It'll help you stay notified for when future videos come out. As always, thanks so much for watching. Consider checking out a video to my left. And I'll see you in the next one.